A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
You know, Herman, I was looking at a list of new AI product launches from just the last week, and I actually started to feel a physical weight in my chest. It is getting impossible to keep track of what is a genuine breakthrough and what is just a thin wrapper around a base model with a shiny logo. As of March 2026, the average enterprise is now managing over 12 distinct LLM-based vendor integrations. 12. That is a massive surface area for failure.
It is a total deluge, corn. I am Herman Poppleberry, and I have been feeling that same pressure. We are seeing over 50 specialized agents, new orchestration frameworks, and supposed enterprise solutions hitting the market every single week. If we are feeling overwhelmed, imagine being a CTO at a Fortune 500 company where the stakes are millions of dollars and the potential for massive technical debt is lurking behind every single sales pitch. They are falling into what I call the FOMO-driven architecture trap.
That is the core of the problem. Today's prompt from Daniel is about exactly that struggle. He is asking how the world's most ambitious companies actually keep up without drowning in the noise. He wants to know how time-poor CTOs vet these options when they do not have the internal bandwidth to run a full laboratory experiment for every new tool. It feels like a competitive death sentence to just wait and see, but moving too fast leads to a fragmented, unmanageable stack.
It is a great question because the old way of doing things is completely broken. In the past, you would wait for a big analyst firm like Gartner or Forrester to put out a magic quadrant or a wave report. But the cycle of AI development is moving 10 times faster than the cycle of an analyst report. By the time a report is published, the models that evaluate it are already legacy tech. If you are waiting for a 2026 report to tell you about a model released in late 2025, you have already lost the lead.
We have talked about AI washing before, all the way back in episode 667, but it has evolved. It is not just about fake AI anymore. Now it is about integration fatigue. Companies are exhausted by the promise of easy integration that turns into a 6-month nightmare of data cleaning and API debugging. This has created a massive opening for a new kind of player in the ecosystem. You mentioned them earlier, the integration scouts.
Integration scouts are the new breed of technical consultant. We are moving away from the era of the management consultant who delivers a 100-page slide deck and toward the era of the engineer consultant who delivers a working prototype. These scouts do not just look at the marketing materials. They take the vendor's claims, get under the hood, and try to break the product before the client ever signs a contract. They are technical first boutiques, often staffed by former lead engineers from the big labs.
So, instead of a CTO having to assign their own lead engineers to spend 3 weeks testing a new vector database or a specialized agent, they hire these scouts to do the dirty work?
That is the model. These firms, like Applied AI Labs or various niche boutiques in San Francisco and London, maintain their own internal benchmarking suites. They are building a business on the fact that you cannot trust vendor benchmarks. When a company claims they have a 2 million token context window, the scout does not just say, wow, that is a lot of tokens. They run a needle in a haystack test. They want to see if the model can actually retrieve a specific piece of information buried at the 700,000 token mark, or if it suffers from that lost in the middle phenomenon where accuracy drops off a cliff.
I have seen some of those reports. It is wild how often the performance degrades long before you hit the advertised limit. It is like a car manufacturer claiming a car gets 100 miles per gallon, but only if you are driving downhill with a tailwind and the engine turned off. This is what you call the context window mirage, right?
Precisely. It is one of the biggest points of failure right now. These vendors are competing on headline numbers because that is what sells to the C-suite, but the technical reality is often much messier. The scouts use automated evaluation frameworks to provide what I call shadow benchmarking. They are not just asking the model to write a poem. They are using tools like RAGAS, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation Evaluation Schema, or frameworks like TrueLens.
Shadow benchmarking. Explain the mechanism there for the non-engineers, because I think people assume benchmarking is just running a few prompts and seeing if the answer looks right.
It is much more rigorous. With RAGAS, for example, they are measuring 4 key metrics: faithfulness, answer relevance, context precision, and context recall. Faithfulness checks if the answer is actually derived from the retrieved documents, not just made up by the LLM. Answer relevance ensures the response actually addresses the user's query. Context precision and recall measure how well the retrieval system is actually finding the right needles in the data haystack. They will take a company's specific, messy, real-world data, the stuff that is full of typos, weird formatting, and conflicting information, and run it through the vendor's system. They are looking for the failure rate in production-like conditions, not the clean room conditions the vendor used for their marketing deck.
This seems like a necessary evolution because the internal R&D teams at most companies are already buried in their own product roadmaps. They do not have time to be a full-time testing lab for the entire industry. But is there a risk here? If you outsource your technical vetting, are you not effectively outsourcing your strategy?
There is a delicate balance. If you let a consultant tell you what your roadmap should be, you are in trouble. But if you use them as a filter to tell you which 3 tools out of 50 are actually worth your time, that is just smart resource management. The best CTOs I am seeing are using these scouts to build a defensive AI architecture. They want to make sure that whatever they integrate today can be swapped out tomorrow. This leads us perfectly into the question of vendor lock-in, which we touched on back in episode 808.
The deprecation trap. The pace of change is so fast that you have to assume the model you love today will be obsolete or deprecated within 18 months. If these scouts are helping companies build model-agnostic pipelines, they are providing a huge amount of value. They are essentially helping companies avoid vendor lock-in before the lock is even turned.
They really are. They look for modularity. If a vendor says you have to use their proprietary orchestration layer to get the best results, the scout usually flags that as a major risk. They want to see open APIs and the ability to point the system at a different LLM with minimal friction. They might recommend using something like LiteLLL or a custom proxy layer so the enterprise can switch from OpenAI to Anthropic or an open weights model like Llama 4 in a matter of hours, not months.
It is interesting to see how this is changing the consulting landscape. The big legacy firms are trying to catch up, but they are often too slow. They are still trying to sell the idea of AI transformation as a 3-year project. In 2026, a 3-year project is an eternity. You need results in 3 months. That is why the AI first consulting market grew by 42% year over year in 2025.
And that is why we are seeing the rise of technical due diligence as a standalone service. It is not just CTOs hiring these scouts. Private equity firms and venture capitalists are hiring them to audit the code bases of AI. Startups before they invest. They want to know if the startup actually has a proprietary moat or if they're just paying a massive monthly bill to a major provider and calling it their own technology. They look at the prompt engineering, the RAG, architecture, and the error handling. If the agent is just a series of if-then statements with a chat interface, the scout will find it.
I bet those audits are revealing some uncomfortable truths. There is so much smoke and mirrors. People are using the term AI agent to describe things that are basically just legacy expert systems with better marketing.
It is exactly that. The scouts are the ones pointing out that an agent is only as good as its ability to handle tool calling and self-correction. If an agent breaks the moment it receives an unexpected JSON schema, it is not ready for the enterprise. These boutiques are creating a source of truth that is independent of the big cloud providers. They are often leveraging open source evaluation datasets to keep everyone honest. They are essentially a red team for data.
I love that term. We usually think of red teaming in terms of security, trying to hack a system to find vulnerabilities. But here, it is about red teaming the utility and the truthfulness of the AI output. If you are a medical tech company or a financial services firm, a 5% hallucination rate isn't just a minor bug. It is a catastrophic liability.
And that is where the specialized knowledge comes in. You might have a scout firm that only does AI for legal tech. They understand the specific nuances of legal citations and privilege in a way that a generalist analyst never could. They are not just testing the AI, they are testing the AI in the context of the law. They understand that a model might be great at summarizing a deposition, but terrible at identifying conflicting case law.
It feels like we are seeing a shift from broad-spectrum expertise to deep vertical technical scouting. But let's talk about the cost. Hiring a boutique firm of elite engineers to run a month-long benchmarking project cannot be cheap. Is this only a game for the top 1% of companies?
Initially, yes, but the tools they are building to do this work are starting to trickle down. We are seeing the emergence of automated AI evaluation platforms that small to mid-sized companies can use. But the human element, the interpretation of those results, that is still where the premium lives. A CTO is paying for the peace of mind to say to their board, we looked at 30 options, we stress tested these 3, and this is why we chose this specific path. That confidence is worth a lot of money when the alternative is a failed multi-million-dollar implementation.
It also helps with the FOMO problem. If you have a trusted scout telling you that the latest shiny object is actually 30% slower and more expensive than what you are currently using, you can ignore the headlines and stay focused on your core business. It allows you to be strategically slow when everyone else is being impulsively fast.
That is a great way to put it. Strategically slow is a superpower in this market. It is about moving with intent rather than moving out of panic. Let's look at a case study to illustrate this. I was reading about a Fortune 500 logistics firm that was using a proprietary black box agent for their customer service and supply chain routing. They were paying a fortune in licensing fees and had zero visibility into why the model was making certain decisions. They were locked in.
That sounds like a nightmare for a CTO. How did the scouts help?
They brought in a boutique firm that performed a deep technical audit. The scouts didn't just read the manual, they ran parallel tests using an open weights architecture, specifically a fine-tuned version of a smaller model running on a modular framework. They realized that for 80% of the company's tasks, the massive, expensive black box model was actually overkill and, surprisingly, less accurate because it was prone to overcomplicating simple routing logic.
So they were paying more for worse performance?
The scout firm helped them transition to a modular architecture where they owned the orchestration layer. They moved the high-volume, low-complexity tasks to the smaller, faster model and only routed the truly complex edge cases to the expensive frontier models. The result? They saved over $4 million in annual recurring costs, and their customer satisfaction scores actually went up because the latency dropped from 3 seconds to under 500 milliseconds. That is the power of a defensive, modular AI. Architecture.
That is the dream. Getting better performance for less money by actually understanding the technology rather than just buying the most expensive version of it. It requires a level of technical literacy that a lot of traditional management consultants just do not possess. If you cannot read the documentation and understand the underlying architecture, you are just a glorified salesperson for the big vendors.
And that is the tension. The big legacy firms are trying to hire engineers as fast as they can, but the culture of those firms is often at odds with the kind of rapid, code-first iteration that AI requires. The scouts are usually small teams of 10 to 20 people who are obsessed with the tech. They are the ones participating in the open source community, the ones who are actually building their own agents in their spare time. That is the kind of expertise you cannot fake.
It seems like a very pragmatic approach to the problem. This culture of the technical scout, the pioneer who goes out and maps the territory before the settlers arrive. It is about leveraging that high-end talent to create a massive competitive advantage. I think we are going to see more of this, not less, as the models become even more complex and the agentic workflows become the standard.
I agree. We are moving toward a world where every major enterprise will have either an internal scout team or a long-term partnership with a boutique firm. The risk of making a bad bet on your foundational AI stack is just too high to leave to chance or to a glossy brochure.
So, if you are a CTO listening to this on your way to the office, What are the actual takeaways? How do you start moving toward this more rigorous approach to vetting?
The first step is to stop trusting marketing benchmarks, period. If a vendor says their model is the best at coding, ask them to run it against your specific internal code base, not a generic dataset like human evil. You need to see how it handles your specific technical debt, your specific naming conventions, and your specific security protocols.
That makes a lot of sense. It is like testing an off-road vehicle. You do not care how it performs on a paved track. You want to see it in the mud.
Second, you have to prioritize modularity above all else. If an AI solution requires you to rewrite your entire data layer or lock yourself into a single cloud provider's ecosystem, the cost of switching later will be astronomical. You want to build a system where you can swap the model in 48 hours if a better one comes along. If you can't do that, you are over-leveraged. You are essentially betting your company's future on one vendor's roadmap.
And what about the consultants? How do you tell the difference between a scout and a traditional consultant who just learned the lingo last week?
Look for code-first deliverables. If the primary output of the engagement is a PDF slide deck, you hired the wrong firm. If the output is a GitHub repository with a benchmarking suite, a working prototype, and a documented evaluation of 3 different model architectures using your own data, then you are working with a scout. You want to see the work, not just the opinion. Ask them to show you their RAGAS scores.
I think that is a really important distinction. It is the difference between someone telling you the weather and someone building you a weather station. One is a fleeting insight. The other is a permanent capability.
That is a perfect analogy. And finally, I would say that the best way to stay updated is to actually build something. Even if it is just a small internal tool for your team, the act of building forces you to confront the realities of latency, cost, and reliability in a way that reading articles never will. The CTOs who are winning in 2026 are the ones who still have their hands on the keyboard, at least occasionally. They understand the feel of the models.
It is about maintaining that technical edge. You cannot lead a technical organization if you are completely disconnected from the reality of the code. This has been a really enlightening look at how the big players are navigating this chaos. It is not just about having the biggest budget, it is about having the best filter.
It really is. The noise is only going to get louder, so the quality of your filter is your most important asset. I find it fascinating that we are seeing this return to deep technical expertise as the ultimate differentiator. For a while, it felt like everything was becoming a commodity, but the complexity of AI has made the expert more valuable than ever.
It is a good time to be a nerd, Herman.
It is the best time, Corn. I wouldn't want to be doing anything else.
Well, I think that is a solid place to wrap this one up. We have covered the rise of the integration scout, the fallacy of the context window, and why your next consultant should be delivering code instead of slides.
This was a fun one. It is a topic that is changing so fast we might need to revisit it in a few months just to see how the landscape has shifted again. Maybe by then the scouts will have their own AI scouts.
I am sure Daniel will have another prompt for us by then. Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that powered this show. Their serverless infrastructure is exactly the kind of modular, developer-first tech we were talking about today. It allows teams to scale their testing without getting bogged down in infrastructure management.
This has been my weird prompts. If you are finding these deep dives helpful, we would love for you to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It genuinely helps other people discover the show and keeps us motivated to keep digging into these weird prompts.
You can also find us at myweirdprompts.com for our full archive and all the ways to subscribe.
Until next time, stay curious and keep building.
Bye, everyone.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our